The intent is very strong. It's to hurt somebody. And that invokes certain emotions and certain instincts. Instincts of survival, instincts of fear that you may not be able to be up to it. Even instincts of trying to get out of it. You know, nature is about surviving. It's not about winning. Nature is about making sure that its greatest creation, human life, gets to the next day, to the next hour, to the next minute. You know, you're getting in that ring and you think about all these bad things that can happen. The one thing you can rely on is somebody who's stout, somebody who's dependable, that's telling you everything's going to be okay, who's telling you from experience that you're going to be able to get through it. You know, your mind is making it worse than it is. Your mind is thinking of scenarios that in some ways are out of control. In some ways, your greatest enemy is your imagination. Those hours before the fight, those days before the fight when you can't sleep at night. And you need somebody to talk you off the cliff, to talk you off the edge, and to be able to not only tell you everything's going to be okay, but to prove it to a point from their experience, and just to be there with you. Obviously, it's a team sport, more so than maybe any other team, because the risk is so much higher. The urgency is so much greater. The need is so much more to be able to hook up with somebody that, as I said, can make things real to you, can give you sort of a bridge to walk across those waters. You know, you're walking across a gulf of things you've never walked across before, and there's a lot of danger below. You need someone to kind of put something out there that you can safely get across. You need somebody that can be there with you in a much more intense way, in a much more dynamic way, much more serious way than anything else. I mean, the boxing coaches are there with you not just for the season. There is no season. They're not there with you for 3 months during the daytime. They're with you at nighttime. They're with you traveling. They're with you. There's no season. They're with you all the time. They're growing you. They're literally growing a kid, nurturing a kid in so many departments, technically, physically, emotionally, mentally. And, you know, that's the greatest team aspect I've ever heard of. Then emotionally, you have to be developed to use that talent. Otherwise, it's kind of like a car with a good engine in it. You know, it's got all good parts in it. You know, the engine's good, the drive shaft is good, spark plugs are good, but you have no driver. You know, the emotion is the driver. So then you need somebody to sculpture that driver, to take that car onto the track and make the right turns. So, you know, it's much more than the layman thinks. It's a 50-50 proposition. Yeah, you need the talent, but you need that talent developed. And you need to go through some very difficult places and sort of rapids and a waterfall, so to speak, to get to where you need to get to. And that trainer, that coach, is the person who's, you know, controlling that rudder of that raft that's going through those rapids. Boxers are much more accessible than 99% of the other athletes. The pompousness, the eliteness, the aloofness, it's knocked out of them. It's gone. When you step in that ring, you know, there's no room for those things. There's only room for respect for the game, respect for your opponent, fear for the game, fear for your opponent, but understanding those dimensions and controlling them. There's no room for eliteness. There's no room for, you know, being snobby. Fighters are too busy trying to control themselves, trying to get to a place that's very difficult to get to, and trying to be able to be as strong inside themselves and as accountable inside themselves as they can be. When you're concentrating on being wholer, in that true sense that I just finished talking about, you're going to be stronger in those other areas. You're not going to be hollow in those areas because you've already cemented yourself in the areas that really count. So those other areas that you just talked about, they're going to be more bolstered. They're going to be more secure. Half of these people, the way they act like that is because they're very insecure. Well, fighters have insecurities, but they bolster, they face those insecurities. And once you face them in that kind of arena, in the ring, well, you sure as hell can face them better when you talk to your public. You're more together now. You don't have to bullshit people. And you don't have to bullshit yourself so much. The clock started ticking a lot before you put gloves on. The clock started ticking. It's like the cab driver, you know, when he hits that meter. You know, sometimes he hits the meter before he gets to the house. You know, the meter started already. You know, what kind of discipline was in your life? What have you faced in your life? What kind of upbringing did you have? How many truths did you have to face? You know, that's already started. That's already been formed. It's just going to be developed more, and it's going to come out and be shown more. Light's about to be shown on it, or shined on it, that have never been shined on it before. When you tell a kid, go slip a punch and throw a left hook to the body, he does it. He just takes the mechanism of what's in front of him. He just takes the physical act, and he applies it. He's not thinking about, I could get hit when I do that. If I get close to the guy, you know, he could do something to me. And those doubts, those hesitations start coming forward. The kid doesn't have that yet. He doesn't know better yet. And he's able to be served by that. You know, and also when you're going to see some guys, because they don't face things in their amateur career. We've had some guys that were great amateurs. Man, oh man, they were monsters. But then the pros, they faltered. Because in the amateurs, they were ahead of everybody physically. You know, Tyson's a good example. You know, they didn't, and they weren't getting tested in the areas that you thought they were getting tested. They really weren't. And when graduation day came, they weren't ready. You know, they weren't facing things. Their power, their being so far ahead of those kids at that level, you know, they weren't being extended. They were knocking guys out. They were too fast. And so they weren't being taken into those mental waters where they had to make choices. They had to find out about themselves. You know, Tyson's a good example. And now all of a sudden you get in with the more mature people in the pros, and you have more rounds to be tested. Now some of those shortcomings start popping up. Now you start getting asked questions you didn't get asked. And now where for 3 rounds you could hide from those answers, you got 10 rounds, 12 rounds. You can't hide from them.